everyone. My name is Cara Simon. Welcome to Coffee with Cow. This is Learn International's podcast series talking about current events, COVID, whatever we want to in these days of international education. First, I wanted to just explain who Cow was. We're getting a lot of questions about Coffee with Cow, and this is just kind of an internal joke within the team. Cow's our mascot. She goes everywhere with us. So yeah, that's how we came up with Coffee with Cow. And Samantha is not the cow, just for clarity. So anyway, thanks for being here today, Samantha. Samantha is the CEO and founder of Via TRM, which is a traveler relationship management software and consultancy. She is currently based in Boulder, Colorado, and want to welcome her to the show.
Thanks, Cara. It's great to be here, joining you from my closet.
Yes.
Coffee in closets.
We were just chatting before, and Samantha was saying this is like the thing with podcasts is they're always in the closet. And I have to say, like, your sound is really good. It's all the clothes, as you mentioned.
All the clothes.
Yeah. So let's get started and just chit chat a little bit. Why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself? So maybe pre-VIA days, what's your experience in international ed and what got you to the point at which you are a CEO and founder of an amazing software?
Yeah, a winding path, as many of our paths are. Prior to VIA, I still worked in study abroad. I was in the SUNY system up in New York, working at the New Paltz campus in their study abroad office. And prior to that, I was getting a master's degree in Northern Ireland in peace and conflict studies on a Rotary ambassadorial scholarship. Right. And like many folks in the field, my original inspiration for joining international education was my own study abroad experience in Cyprus 2 years after the UN-controlled border opened this tiny island in the Mediterranean up. And that gave me a huge insight into the possibilities that are created in higher education for folks to explore identities and histories that maybe they hadn't explored quite in that way. And that was happening for me, and that was happening for my classmates in Cyprus who were meeting each other for the first time. So yeah, that's neat. That was it for me. Like, I'm into this international education thing.
Cyprus is on probably one of my bucket lists to go to. And as I was doing research about you, somewhere it noted that you received a Gilman scholarship for doing that study abroad program.
Yes.
It was pretty cool.
Good research. Yes, I did. And I'm really grateful for that. And I also shout out to Jennifer Engel. She was the director at the University of South Carolina, which is where I did my undergrad, and was my Gilman advisor. And we're now friends and colleagues, and we presented an EFSA together. Yeah, she works with CIS abroad now.
Ah, nice. Yeah, I used to do some of the committees for the Gilman, and then inevitably I would leave all the essays until like 2 days before they should be graded. Not really a good idea, but this like mounds of it. So what was your final project for the?
It was a photo gallery. So I was trying to, because I was, the school that I was at was on the border. Mm-hmm. I wanted to have a little vignettes, of just life. And it was also just such a place that most folks I had talked to, and my friends and family didn't really know about. And I thought, well, let me see if I can tell some stories through a photo gallery, which I presented at the Study Abroad Fair at the University of South Carolina, which was a pretty big high traffic area, which was great. And then I got to tell other students about the gallery and the Gilman and study abroad all at once. And it was a great project.
Yeah. That was my favorite part, I think, about grading the papers, was looking at the projects. I'm like, oh, I wish I could see them all.
Do you have one that you remember as being your favorite, or like the most standout one?
There was a student who wanted, now this might happen more, this is about 10 years ago maybe, but he wanted to develop his own re-entry program for returnee study. I mean, this was kind of, re-entry was just starting to get going, and he had mapped out this whole kind of set lesson plan, I guess. And I was thinking, wow, at that age, I was not thinking about those things. So he was an undergraduate student. So that was pretty impressive for me to see. I don't know if he got awarded the Gilman, but I remember reading that one. So
Yeah, that'd be super interesting to go back to today to see.
yeah,
Just
see how
where his
that.
head was at.
Exactly. So tell us a little bit then, your path right now with Via. You launched in 2013, I think. Is that
Yeah, so as with any new endeavor, the timeline depends on where you count it from. The day that I knew we were going to pursue this, the day that you build a team, the day that you get your first product launched, the day that you get your public product launch, all of those were really important milestones. I started this journey in 2012. Met up with a now former business partner who was building a crowdfunding software to help students raise money to go abroad. She never was able to study abroad because she couldn't afford it. And of course, this was already my passion. I was a Gilman advisor, for my campus prior to that, and Freeman Asia, and of course, a Gilman scholar myself, and just really loved this idea that we could create an option for students to raise money on their own, and even while they're waiting to see if they got the Gilman. And so I joined her in that effort, and we helped students raise more than $80,000 on what was then known as Project Travel. Yeah. We got into this accelerator program in upstate Michigan in Harbor Springs called Cool House Labs, and this was in 2013.
Okay.
And it was during that program that we realized that it was a great project, it was a great idea, but it wasn't a business. It wasn't sustainable. We weren't making money, but working 80-hour weeks, and we wanted something that was going to last and that could actually help more and more students be able to access international education. And that's not possible if you're volunteering 80 hours of your week. So we said, well, and also we learned that, study abroad, it was really hard. Students, it wasn't catching on quite the way that we hoped it would. The service learning and volunteer programs were getting a little more successful in the crowdfunding model, but we said, okay, what are the problems and the issues in international ed that we can solve in a more systemic way? And I drew on my experiences as a study abroad advisor, as a student, and I said, everybody wants to reach more students about these opportunities. Everybody wants to reach out and build connections on campus with STEM and with students who haven't historically been able to go abroad, or nobody was asking them if they wanted to or supporting them. But we have these systems that are application management systems, which means it's capturing students at the point of decision versus the point of interest, or even giving them a space without having to physically come in and meet with a person, really, to get started on their own. You can always go to a website, but you're an eyeball, you're an analytic, you're not actually a person showing up to the study abroad office as a human with motivations and barriers and interests and concerns. And that's what we ended up building, was travel relationship management software, which is advising pre-application engagement, application management, and enrollment. And of course, over the years, we launched public in 2016 at NAFSA. Since then, we've gone on to re-release the interface and build hundreds of features in and add whole new releases and all of that good stuff. But that was the journey, and that was a very long answer to your questions.
No, it's good. I love, I don't know, I guess being a business owner myself, I love to hear the journey, because we all take different things from the journey. And as you say, we have different starting points, 2012, 2013, whatnot. And then you have all these milestones that you've accomplished, or you switch, or you're pivoting all the time. So that's a neat story. So when you had first started with your former business partner, what was it? You kind of started to touch on it, but what was it about creating a management software that grabbed you? Was it, for example, were you frustrated with something that happened and you were like, oh, the space needs this kind of, I don't know, software, for lack of a better word, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's funny because, being a founder of a software company, I think it might be natural to assume like, oh, she must be like a tech person.
Techie,
And
yeah.
actually, I'm not. In the sense that I use technology like everyone else in the world,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't. I don't have a computer science degree. I didn't go to a coding school. So for me, technology was really literally the tool when you think about how to reach at scale and how to influence at scale. So to more directly answer your question, there are a couple examples I can pull out. And just like you know this as a business owner, someone asks you a question and you could tell that story a little bit differently every single day, but
Yeah.
there are these themes, right? And so a couple examples that I share frequently are the software I was using in New York. Of course, I have my advising workload, and then I have my students who have already applied, and I'm reviewing them, and I'm working with my exchange partners and all that. So I'm managing the whole spectrum, but my system allows me to really zero in, but in really a super functional way with the students who had already applied. And then meanwhile, I have wikis open and I have my own sort of notes system, which is not anything anyone else in the office is doing.
Mm-hmm.
And then what had happened was one of the advisors had left to go to a different university, and I inherited overnight. My advising load doubled. And meanwhile, those students had been working with my office for 6 months, a year, and I didn't know who they were. My system didn't tell me, except for that they had an application. I couldn't, all of the relationship left with the inboxes. There was no centralized kind of two-way messaging component. And I just thought, for this, from the student's perspective, this is one journey. I'm interested, I explore, I ask questions, I'm afraid, I get advising, I'm excited, I apply, I prepare, and I go. From an advisor's perspective, it's like chunked out into all of these different systems. And I just thought the space needs a way where students can get in, help their advisors know who they are, and have kind of a fuller picture of who they are. Right. And we need to think about the technology that can accomplish that, and think a little bit more outside the box of what existed at that time.
Yeah. I mean, Via's done some remarkable things over the past couple of years. Like, y'all are working really hard. Every time I'm like, oh, that's a new feature. That's this, that's that. So talking about kind of with Via, how do you get feedback from clients, from students, and adapt to that feedback, which could even lead you into talking about the pandemic right now?
Yeah. Also, I want to ask you the same question with Learn. And also, as anyone who is in position, you're going to get the feedback, whether you're listening and you care and you do something about it. Is there's the difference. We get feedback in a lot of different ways. Also, because we've made it an explicit pillar of our organization to provide the best client experience in international education, and we feel proud that we can say that. And what that means is listening to people. So of course we have our official channels that our clients know about, and they'll write us through there. We have personal check-ins, we have client webinars, we do think tanks. We went to an East Coast school that's not even a client last year, and we did a whole half-day workshop on reporting. It was a design thinking workshop, and we stated the purpose is for us to learn kind of where reporting is today in the field and where it needs to go. And this was a school that was large and represented a lot of different types of students. So it runs the gamut. And then what do you do with that? It's the classic cliche, drinking from the fire hose. You have to develop skills to be able to prioritize and be clear with your team about, okay, we have all this feedback. Number one, how do we validate it? Even if we can't immediately act on all of it tomorrow, how do we validate it? Let the person know we got it. Here's what we do with it. Be honest with them if we can't immediately act on it. And then if we can, we go back and say, here's the plan. And if anything changes because of things we can't anticipate, I don't know, like a pandemic, we'll come back and let you know.
Yeah.
So, there's this delicate balance, and I'm sure you know this too, of there's what you intend to do and what you have capacity and resources with the information you have, and then you adjust as you move. And sometimes you get a little more or differently than you expected, and then sometimes you have to scale back and redirect because life changes. So.
Yeah, and quickly, as in no one could have predicted all this would be happening.
Yeah.
I was thinking at one of the NAFSAs, I think it was NAFSA, you and I were chit-chatting and just being women in leadership. So you were saying, you have all this feedback and you have a team and you kind of filter through what's doable, what's not doable. How do you think, what's your leadership style? Let me start there first with your
Yeah.
team.
Okay. I'm going to answer that, but I actually left out a very important piece of your last question. So I'm
Yes,
going to quickly,
do that.
as a software company, we have user data, which we just talked about in our market report.
Yeah.
So that is a unique aspect of our feedback mechanisms that I didn't have, for example, when I was a study abroad advisor, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the same way. So literally looking at when people sign up, when they drop off, when they, what are the trends, et cetera. We don't look at students' information specifically. It's
Right.
against our policies unless we're requested to for technical support reasons, but in aggregate and anonymized, we can learn a lot through what students and faculty are doing, et cetera, through the software. So
Okay.
user data.
So that's good. So I will pause my question to go back to user data. So could you, from what you're seeing just right now, the past couple months, what kind of trend are you seeing within users? Has there been a massive shift, or is it steady, or what would you say?
This one is going to sound super obvious because it is, but the deferral and withdrawal rates
Yeah.
obviously are higher than they've ever been.
Mm-hmm.
And we actually, in response to COVID, added in our software, whether an administrator or a student themselves chooses to withdraw, they can give a reason or not.
Right.
And we added a reason in COVID to help look at the data, say next year, and be able to distinguish between cancellation of program that is un-COVID related and then COVID, because it was just so obvious that was what was happening.
That's a great idea. That'll be, I think, really interesting to see. Did people withdraw on their own accord? Was it, like you said, cancellation of the program from the university, or for whatever reason, and then or deferrals? I'd be curious to see, what all three of those are. So we're kind of on the other side as a provider. We have most of our programs are just canceled, especially when the U.S. government put in I think it was level 4. Yeah. So everything was just basically canceled to the end of the summer. Some schools at the end of the year. We've talked to some other colleagues just in provider land, and no one's really counting on business to be picking up until 2021. Yeah. Something like that. And even deferrals, so we've had a few deferrals, and it's interesting times, just the unknown, right? And all we can do is control what we can control and just kind of go with it. Hence, we're doing Coffee with Cal podcast. So that's great.
And who knows, maybe this will be such an integral part of your cadence and connecting with people and storytelling. Who knows? Maybe that'll be something you bring with you into the post-COVID era.
Exactly. And I just think it's kind of, when this all started, we can go back into the leadership thing, but something I had our team do was start writing blogs, right? So this one thing I've been wanting to learn blog forever, right? And it's always on the long finger, just back burner. And I'm like, okay, we got some time now to do this. So it's really great because we've been doing it pretty regularly, but it was not only, good for learn, but it was good for me as a leader just to check in with the team and see how everyone's kind of how they're coping. We've been remote for even longer than in the States here. So it's been really, really enlightening and kind of a good practice, I think, within the team. I mean, they may disagree, but I like it. So bringing me back to kind of leadership, how have you led your team? I guess we could talk about COVID again through this pandemic. Has that changed a lot, your leadership style, or are y'all just trucking along?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll put the caveat out there that I feel like my team would probably be the most honest purveyors of my leadership style and how they would experience it on the other side. But what I've strived to do is be consistent and be better and grow and learn constantly. So I'm now, I guess, depending on how you look at it, I guess I don't know, in year 6 or 7 of being a managing people. Learned a whole lot, and I hope I've changed since years 1 and 2.
I'd
Given
say
my relationship
yes.
with my team, I think the answer would be yes. But you know, given that amount of time, so much has happened that's been unexpected in the time that I've been doing this, that the COVID was just one more unexpected thing. And I think we showed up to it in the ways that we learned we needed to show up to it, which is, first of all, to communication. It sounds basic, but it actually isn't, especially when it's hard and you don't know things as leaders. It's tempting to be like, we don't want to communicate incorrectly and then have to correct ourselves, but we don't have all the information, so let's just sit on it for a little bit. And I understand that decision-making process, but we decided early, for example, to start communicating with the team before, for example, anyone in international education publicly or any of the conferences, for example, were starting to talk about not having events. I mean, we were having internal conversations about anything from the philosophical engagement on the risk of what it means, and we pulled back as a company policy. So first we started with and said, we don't know if these events will be canceled or not. We may ultimately pull out whether or not they cancel before they cancel. We'll get back to you in 3 days on that. But as a policy, number one, we were already half remote, but we said as a policy, anyone can work from home from the Colorado office starting now. As a policy, if you are scheduled to go to a work trip right now in the next 6 weeks, it is your choice, and we will cancel if you decide right now ahead of the company canceling or these, so we started to just cascade messaging like that, and it worked really well and opened up a line of communication. And ultimately we did pull out of these events before they canceled, and then they canceled like days later, and so it felt good to be having the conversations and being honest with the team, and also saying, here's what we don't know. Here's the informational sources we're looking at. Here's the decisions we'll be making, not without you, but that we'll be making and sharing with you. And then these are the decisions we need to make together as a team. And that's all you can really do in a moment when things are changing. At that moment, it was like by the minute almost.
I know. Ours was, I think, we were starting to do the same things, and has been a week that we were like, oh wow, this is happening. Yep, we're going to be doing plan A, B, C, D, E, F, G right now. So it sounds like you touched on communication, and I've observed just you and then Lisa and, Michaela, a few folks that are on your team, and you all seem to communicate really well, which makes me think, that comes from leadership, but it also is probably the type of person that is attracted to working with Via and, the industry that we're in. So just thinking kind of about that, if your staff were to say what your leadership style was, what do you think that they would say to you?
Maybe I'll send them this podcast and say, please.
They're not going to comment on it anyway.
So I wish I could just give you the straight answer. I'm the middle child, and I have a master's degree in peace and conflict studies. And what that means is that I'm fascinated by conflict and communication, right? So there's my backdrop. I want harmony, and it really bothers me when there isn't harmony. So communication has been one of the tools to help us lean into conflict and vulnerability and courage. And also I'm learning to have courage to sit with conflict and let it resolve in a timeline that isn't fueled by an anxious leader who really wants everyone to be communicating well and saying their feelings, but in respectful ways, and all of these things that one hopes in an ideal sense. So I guess what I'm saying is I still feel very much on a journey of this leadership style, which is committed to stepping in with courage to communication, whether that is, so one of our core values, for example, is give good vibes. And we have this practice every Friday where we close the week as a team remotely, where you give at least one, but and we joke, it's kind of a rule, but everyone breaks it. You're supposed to give one good vibe specific to someone during the week on the team who did something that meant something to you.
That's great.
Gratitude practice, really. And so that's really carried through, I think, our team culture in general. And then we find we'll be more prone and primed to uplifting and expressing gratitude for work of our clients or of our partners or someone we present with or a team member when it's not good vibes time officially. And so that's been important to cultivate. And frankly, something I don't think I inherently did naturally well coming from the family culture that I did. I grew up in, Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and praise or sort of verbal gratitude was not a part of the culture. So that was something I kind of had to
learn,
value around to ritualize it. And now it feels really natural, but that was definitely not normal for me. And then on the other side, work in progress. Every human is different in terms of how what do you do when things aren't going well and people aren't communicating well? I'll be wrestling with that question until the day I die. But that said, at Via, we don't shy away we don't pretend like it's not there. And I think that's important. So whatever I've brought to the team is, we might not get it right every time. We might always be on this trajectory of learning, but what we're not going to do is stuff it underground and then hope it just works itself out, because I know that it won't. And
that's really well said. The way that you put that, I think we are, as humans, whether you're in leadership role, whether you're a business owner, whether you're in international ed, we're all growing, right? And that's what makes us human, is that we learn from our mistakes, if you want to call them mistakes. Maybe they were meant to happen so that you can learn from them. It sounds like you have a nice setup with everybody there. And I mean, personally, from working with you guys in the past, I can tell the communication is there because I've experienced it. So when you mentioned a while ago, your customer service level is right up there. I don't know, you used a term that I can't remember, but it was basically like, yeah, you guys are really good at what you do. So thanks for sharing that. Sometimes it's, I tend to be a feelings person. I think that you're probably a feelings person, and it's interesting when I talk to different people in leadership roles, how some are more analytical, some are feeling, some are communication based. Like it's fascinating, all within our industry and how we all relate. So I wanted to kind of ask one more question in relation to leadership, and then a fun one after that.
Okay. Oh, I think that's fun, but that's maybe the nerd.
No, maybe a question meaning fun as in like mindless. You don't really have to think about it, but which is my problem lately with Netflix, because it's mindless and I watch it all the time. So I'm always curious, as a female, is there anything, an exceptional challenge that you've grown from that you would share with other women in leadership roles?
Do we have another 5 hours here?
Just one now, just one. It's an easy job, isn't it? I mean, it's so easy.
Creativity, it's good. What I want to offer is a heuristic, right? Not a platitude.
Yeah, well.
Struggling to find which one.
Good luck with that.
Actually, can I pose that back to you first, and also, to give me the excuse to be able to think about how to pull that into one? So
one that comes to mind, and I don't mean any offense to anyone culturally anywhere, and I think I talked about this because I was processing it at the time. There's been quite a few times where I've been in a meeting with my partner, and I will ask a question or present an idea, and the people in the room will respond to my partner, who is male, even though I'm the one who said it, right? And so my background, I was a therapist, and I'm like, what is this trigger with me? I have a really strong mama who's an electrician, so I grew up with like all the feels about women being strong, but having to, balance this fine line always, you know, and then trying to assess my own, is this a me issue? Is this actually happening? Am I making it up? Is it perceived? All these kinds of things, right? It just makes your head spin. So kind of what you said is sitting with that. Do you remember how you said earlier, like sitting with the conflict of being okay with it? So I used to get really fired up about it, and I would do one, either react emotionally or I get quiet. So that was kind of a growth that I've had to go through, and I can't expect other people to change their behavior, right? But I can change my own. Yeah. So I've just, it still gets me sometimes for whatever reason or not. But what's been great is my partner will redirect in meetings when that happens, right? So he understands that that's something that probably triggers something from my past. I'm an only child, you're the middle child. I don't know, there's all kinds of stuff, right? So that's one that I've had to kind of come to grips with and just be chill about it and just be like, okay, this is how it is, and just roll with it, right? And that's where I'm at right now with that. So that's a big one for me. Yeah.
I'm so glad you shared that. And also, I didn't know that your mom was an electrician, or is, yeah. Well, I don't know.
Just retired. She's pretty
okay. That's amazing. And I know that you and I just, you know, offline at conferences, we've met for coffee and talked about this topic a lot, and it's near and dear, I think, to both of our hearts. And I'm not done with that question. You know, within international education, outside of international education, I had the extraordinarily rewarding experience of being able to mentor 2 female founders at the Watson Program Institute here at in Boulder, and this past semester, and that was very present.
Yeah, interesting.
So, you know, I'd answer this question differently tomorrow, although the truth of it would still, the core of it would still be the same. And it's honesty, which actually masks the juice and the grit of what I want to get at. But so I want to qualify it. It's being honest with yourself in two ways in leadership, especially. It's being honest, and like you mentioned, a part of your story was questioning, is this real? Did this happen? It's being honest with yourself and saying, it did happen, and I saw it, and I'm validating my own perceptions. And there was a phrase that came to mind at one point in my own journey, and it was probably a combination of personal and professional things, but it was, Samantha, at least validate and acknowledge your own perspective, at least on par with other people. Maybe you need to, you know, maybe at some point it'll be at work to be able to actually prefer your perspective over others, but at least validate it on par with other people. And that was a huge growth for me, to not constantly be questioning or saying, well, this is really what I saw, but this other person saw something different. And so their reality reigns. And it's understanding the power dynamic there, even within your own self. So if you have to learn how to value your own experience before you can help create the space in the world that you need to be an effective leader.
Right.
And so it's honesty there. And it's also honesty of, you know, I could share, I think, 1,000 little microaggression stories, or just straight up aggression stories of being you know, a woman in leadership. But what's also true is that I'm human and I mess up.
Yeah.
And I don't ever want, there can be multiple truths here of, maybe there was something that happened in a circumstance, whether it's an internal communication with my team or an external engagement with a client or a prospect or an investor or whoever. And maybe what came my way, there was something that was lined or explicit about undermining my authority as the CEO of this company, or my leadership as a woman, or something along those lines.
Yeah.
And maybe I didn't react so well. Well, I have choices. I can both be honest with that happened, and then I can also be honest, I didn't handle it very well, right? And then learn how to do what regardless of what the other people in the room think or do.
Right.
Next time, am I proud of the reaction? Is it honest to my core, who I want to be in the world? And if the answer is yes, then regardless of how they're going to react, I can walk away without you know.
I can relate to that. It's kind of, I don't know about you, but it's like a life's work for me. And I think it's just, I don't know.
Most people, all people.
Most people, that's it. I mean, I talk about women in leadership, and there's men and people who experience the same things. I think it's just something I'm interested in, so I wanted to pick your brain about it. But I appreciate you sharing that. It's yeah, it's interesting times, and I think whatever country you're in is so different too. So whether in the US or I'm in Ireland or the UK or Australia, it'd be interesting to talk to different women in our positions to just see if the trends are the same. I mean, there's a lot of research on it, so it must be something similar. But bottom line, what you're saying, and I think is important for listeners, is just be okay with your response and acknowledge that, okay, yep, maybe I did handle that well. Maybe I could have done better. And like, how do I work on this for next time? I mean, that's the best any of us can do, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, fun questions. Tell me a little bit about, so you garden, or maybe pretend to garden. I don't know.
I'm trying.
What kind of are your hobbies? What do you do to chill out?
Yeah, I think like most people that goes through chapters,
Yeah.
I live in Boulder, Colorado, so a constant for me, the reason I moved here, or at least a huge part of the reason I moved here, was the wilderness, the mountains. So hiking, biking, sometimes by myself, often with, friends, and at this moment, social distance hike with my girlfriend for sure. Yeah, that's a mainstay. Anything that's getting me outside, camping, hiking.
Yeah.
At home, I love to read. I'm usually in the middle of at least four books.
4 books at the same time. I do the same thing.
Yeah,
I don't feel like this today. It is. Yeah.
Yeah, so books. And I do play guitar. I have since I was 10 years old.
Cool.
And sometimes it's a great stress reliever to just sing and belt something out and play. And then sometimes I don't touch it for months. It's kind of depends. And recently, actually, I have I have an undergraduate degree in hotel, restaurant, and tourism management, which I was most interested in from, kind of interestingly enough, maybe like the experiential side of events, which then more a love for study abroad. But I was forced to take cooking, like food labs. Yeah. But I'm so grateful for that today, because there's just some foundational things there that I feel I can really enjoy now in cooking and baking. So I've been doing a lot of that lately, and that's been great.
So is that like, it's just so funny as we're talking, because was that something you like to do anyway? Cooking, baking, whatever?
It is. It is, except for when I'm really stressed out, and then I just want to go and have someone else, take out.
Yeah. Take out.
Cooking home and stay at home, even if you are stressed out, like you're at home, and then it's kind of a good way to work with your hands and listen to a podcast.
Yeah. That's funny. So notoriously, I'm not someone who likes to cook, right? It's like I grew up, my dad cooked. My mom didn't cook. She was the one who fixed things around the house. My dad cooked, kind of a thing. And my partner, same thing. He's the one who likes to cook. But during the pandemic, I was like, I am going to get recipes and do things. So I would spend, I don't know, when I was in the States, so I just got back to Ireland. I was kind of stuck, but I was with my family for 2 months. I needed new hobbies to do, right? So I was like cooking. So the way that I managed cooking was like, I'd have Netflix on, this is no joke, with these headphones, and I'd be chopping and I'd be watching Netflix, and then after about an hour I'm like, oh, there's a meal there and I haven't burned anything, which is pretty exciting.
You hit your flow. You like found a way to do it. Yeah, that's fantastic. How did you source your recipes? Was it like mom's cookbook at home, or was it like dad's cookbook at home? Yeah. Was it like New York Times food blog?
Most of it was like, I feel like a stir fry, so I'm gonna Google stir fry. Or my dad and my stepmom, they did send me a few little things. Like they're both at home retired, so they do a lot of cooking together now. But yeah, I had done 2 Google recipes, and then my dad sent me one. Oh, and then a friend, actually a former student, had or not a former student, but anyway, intern. She posted P.F. Chang's lettuce wraps. I'm like obsessed with them, so I made them like twice a week. Nice. So that's on the agenda this week. Anyway, good question. So anything else you'd like to share with our listeners before we wrap up? Just even just, what would you tell a student or someone in international ed about the future or in the moment, whatever floats your boat?
Yeah, wow. I guess I'd just say, be here. We don't know what's going to happen and you can't control it. So be open, be here, be open to whatever is going to happen, and it might not look the way that you hope or want. And it could be it could open up a whole new world that you never knew existed. And it might mean a hard time, or it might mean a wonderful time. Like, we don't know. So I'm really trying to cultivate that in myself right now, and to share that.
Yeah.
I think everyone's reminding each other of that, and I think it's a helpful reminder.
It is. I agree. I think the community sense of what's been going on has been pretty remarkable to watch people come together. And those little reminders are good. So thank you very much for chatting with me today. I wish you the best in Boulder and your nice view of the mountains. I'm very jealous.
It's so good to talk to you. I really appreciate the invitation to have this conversation and your thoughtful questions. And it's by because it was just such a wonderful way to start the day and have a good conversation. So
nice and early. That's good.
Yeah, and I can now say I've officially had a work meeting in my closet.
That's right. Add that to your LinkedIn profile. I'm a podcaster in my closet. All right. Well, thank you to our listeners for joining us with Coffee with Cow, and stay tuned for our next guest speaker. Thanks again for listening, and we will see you soon.